Okay, now Rafael's the expert in MSA. Now, I know a little bit about MSA in that it's a grading system for meat quality, and if you go into the shop and you just shop by the numbers, you won't go wrong. So that's the extent of my knowledge of MSA. Rafael's going to give us a little bit more information on it, and I shall hand over to you. Thank you.
You actually made me sound pretty good, eh? Expert in meat. But guys, thanks for the opportunity to spend the afternoon with you. And to MLA especially for allowing me to be part of your special day. But to my beef, producers and lamb producers, whenever I get to meet you and spend some time with you, I just get awed with the amount of passion and the amount of resilience you guys have to do. So for that, I take my hat off for you, and being exposed to both domestic and export markets, whenever we see Australian beef and lamb on the menu or in a retail outlet, it is regarded as the cleanest, safest and purest meat that we can get on the planet. So I applaud you for that. So I'll try and make this thing work because I am a butcher and not a tech guy. And hold on, here we go. There we go, straight up. So today's session was really about understanding how to use the MSA index and make informed business decisions. So just to give you a bit of my background, you've heard a little bit of that, is I'm a butcher by trade, and I've been lucky enough to sort of work through supply chains, whether it's, when I first started butchering as a 15-year-old, whether it was working with Coles or major supermarkets and understanding their platforms. On the back of that, I was, got a bit excited about, being butchering and understanding the art behind it, and opened up my butcher store. And I had that for 6.5 years. And the reason why I'm so passionate about eating quality is because I had an experience when I was younger where I had one of my favourite customers come in, and it was her son's engagement. And she said, "Raf, can you put away the best bit of, I think it was a ribeye or something along those lines, can you put that away for me? It's my son's engagement." And at that particular time, I thought I was a red-hot butcher, sort of knew what I was doing. I put it away, I aged it for 2 weeks. I gave it to her, her name was Mrs. Barris, she took it home, and when she came in on the Monday after, I thought, oh, she might have a bottle of wine for me or something like that, or a can of beer. But she didn't. She was really disappointed. I had somehow ruined her day. She had taken home this bit of meat. She had cooked as per the instructions, and she failed. She ruined her son's engagement, and in fact, that put that back onto me. So from today, my whole purpose around meat is understanding eating quality and eliminating failure rate for the consumer. So part of the presentation today is with that in mind. And when MSA was designed and started, it was always designed to have an empty chair with the consumer in mind. So bear that in mind as I run through the presentation, and then we'll work through how that sort of impacts you through yourself as a producer. So, I do make a statement, and quite often when I do it, depends on whether it's a beef or lamb's producers, and is there both in the room today? Yes, I'll be careful. So, I quite often say that beef and lamb are the most powerful proteins on the planet. There's no other protein that gives you an emotional attachment like they do. You can have a crayfish every now and then, and you can do whatever you like, but you get it right, and there's nothing better than a steak, yeah? I don't know. I reckon that's my last dish I'm having, right? Get it wrong, and I destroy somebody's, special occasion. So that gives you a little bit of understanding there. But before I get going, I thought we'd just, concentrate on a couple of things. Why, I suppose if an industry, if we look at what impacts us, what do we need to focus on, and what are the consumers looking for? And that is, why do we need to concentrate on eating quality? As a producer, what's important? What are the decisions that you make on farm that impact eating quality? Is it that important? And I hope I gave you enough of a story behind why I think it is. So it's a consumer's point where they pass over money, and in that instance I was a butcher handing over a piece of meat, and it comes back into the supply chain. But we're also expecting consumers to pay more than they ever have before. And I applaud, and I hope that continues, because you guys work really hard as a producer to be able to do that. And I think what happens is the expectation just becomes higher. So it's our role, whether I'm a butcher and I quite often refer to it as the farmer, the butcher, the chef and the consumer. It's our role along the supply chain to get it right and simply eliminate failure rate. That's how simple I see it as a butchery. So so if I can click through to that, there's some of our challenges, and it's really about how do we keep red meat on the table. You know, it's about, you know, making sure that we've got a quality product that exceeds consumers' expectations. And now more than ever, eating quality is just an expectation. There's no room for failure rate. The reality is when a consumer has a failed experience, it can take them up to 6 weeks before they revisit. Get it wrong once, they might forgive you. Get it wrong twice and you start losing trust. Get it wrong 3 times and we're in trouble. And that's the whole essence of where MSA sort of started. So I'll quickly swing through, and part of the presentation I'll be running through is looking at what the MSA index is. We'll be running through that to give you a bit of an idea and how it's calculated, about the MSA index, or the benefits of having an MSA index, and benchmarking as a producer. What does that mean? And ultimately, what does that mean for the consumer? So let's get into that side of it, and ultimately this is it. Consumers tell us what matter. These are some traits, or the traits of a carcass that are being measured, and as we go through these attributes have an impact on eating quality. So just on the consumer, you know, when I look back, the consumers change, right? The consumer, you know, we have a program that tells us around the consumer doing thousands of taste tests around these aspects of eating quality and tell us how they perform. But they're also becoming more disconcerting, and they also want to know what it's eating, where it's from, the region, grass-fed, grain-fed, Angus, Wagyu, a whole bunch of traits that they're much more focused on more than ever. And I don't know, if you've got one of these, mobile phone, you just dial in a recipe these days and you can have whatever you want. So information is at their fingertips, and it's really important to understand how the consumers are thinking. So if we look at that, you know, we start to get a bit of an idea of, you know, where we're starting to go in regard to that. So I thought I'd just take you through an MSA report. And beef producers, you've all would have seen one of these before, yeah? You all would have seen feedback report. Has anyone have an understanding of what a...
Rafael, I might just you know, people here aren't producers, they're
Not...
advisors.
Okay.
So, they probably may not have seen it. I think.
Fantastic. So here's a wonderful tool, and it's a benchmarking tool that MSA, or my MSA, the feedback program allows you to do. So if I was to quickly run through it, it'll give you great information here. And ultimately what happens is we end up with an MSA index, and the MSA index is a single figure that is the eating quality prediction of a carcass. So we run through things like the hang, sex, tropical breed, hot standard carcass weight, marbling, meat colour, fat colour, EMA, which is eye muscle area, pH declines, and a whole bunch of these traits that are measured to give us an eating quality outcome. So from a producer's point of view, and if we're talking to producers, this information is about benchmarking. It's about understanding where you fit, or where your herd or your sits within the eating quality program to get a good understanding of future understanding of where you want to take your eating quality program. So that gives us a bit of an idea on that. And if we look at, so this is a report, and we can actually see in this particular report, we've got one ungraded animal, and that is due to high pH. So high pH is, you know, a trait that has a high measurable outcome, and it becomes very inconsistent when we start getting pH above 5.7. It actually starts to, in this particular case, you can see it's 5.8, and we've got a slightly dark meat colour. So ultimately, what happens is the consumers, when we marry high pH and a dark meat cutter, is we then have an inconsistent product. So it actually, the fibres become coarser. They actually become, when you cook, that actually throws out the juice, and even though it looks like it's still rare, it's still cooking and becomes very inconsistent. So the program identifies these high pH animals and kicks this out of the program to eliminate failure rate when we talk about pH. Yes? Yeah, sure. So there's a couple of things that do that. So ultimately, the animal has an energy source. So if you're stressing the animal out, could be a definite opportunity to deplete that animal in its glycogen source. Could also be a lack of plain of nutrition or things like that. So ultimately, I sum it up as, if I need to drive down Albany, I need a full tank of petrol. If you give me a quarter of a tank of petrol and you expect me to get there, I'm probably going to be hitchhiking halfway down there. So it's a pretty simple process about ensuring from a processor's point of view or a producer's point of view is that we're getting, I suppose, the animals in the best condition getting delivered to a processor. So I'll flick through that. So ultimately we end up with this single figure from an MSA index, and they are derived from measuring 39 different cuts on the carcass and bringing them back to one single figure. So if we look at that tenderloin, we see it at 79 eating quality points, and then we see maybe the shoulder or the chuck sitting at 54. When we bring these cuts back together collectively, we end up with a index score. And ultimately, that index is really about giving us an eating quality value against the carcass. So they measure it from 30 to 80, and obviously the higher the index, the generally the better eating quality experience or better eating quality animal that we'll get from that process. So it's a fantastic tool to be able to predict eating quality on the carcass based on producer-controlled attributes. So we don't look at things like aging in this model. We look at those key attributes that we had up on the board, whether it's it's ossification, whether it's marbling, and a whole bunch of those traits that we had on the feedback report. So for a producer, this tool has become, an exciting tool, and I think it's pretty cool that, once upon a time, we would just get a feedback from your producer, and you would say that you didn't get this animal didn't meet MSA. If I could just quickly go back, we also see an opportunity index, and that actually explains that if this animal would have met the MSA criteria, that's what the MSA index would have done. And ultimately, as producers, when they don't meet the MSA pathway, or they've been hasn't met the pathway or hasn't met an MSA grading, there's generally a penalty applied to that animal. It doesn't go under the MSA program. So currently Australia's eating quality performance, when we start looking at benchmarking, and we do that, we see that the national herd sort of sits at 58.3, and that ranges, like I said, we've got a diverse range of animals that sit, from that 31 to 73, from that 30 to 80, and that was done over that financial year. And we've seen an increase of 0.55 index points. But what I really love about this program is you actually start to see is if we continue to increase the index, is we're continuing to increase the eating quality of our animals. And ultimately, it's about that person sitting on that chair, and it's about understanding how to eliminate failure rate for that consumer. So I think it's a wonderful tool for a producer to be able to understand, and under the My MSA program, you can actually pull all your data. Yes?
Sorry, it's incredible. I didn't realise they went through the whole carcass. What sort of a discount would that animal didn't cut the mustard?
Yeah, look, I'm not a processor, but I would say it would be anywhere between 20 and 40 cents a kilo. So it's funny, in WA we sort of look at it as, when it comes to premiums, we go, MSA, if you don't meet it, then you get a penalty. So it's always seen as a penalty. Where I think in the East Coast it's more like, here's our base, if you hit MSA, here's the premium. So we look at it a bit differently in that, but ultimately, that financially, not meeting the MSA index on that animal, or not meeting the MSA pathway on that animal is going to cost money. And ultimately, nobody really wants it because it ends up in a manufacturing bucket, or it doesn't. A processor doesn't benefit from it because ultimately he hasn't got the outsource to then sell that at a premium. So it's a wonderful tool, and I think it's a great benchmarking tool that we're able to see from a producer point. And I think, when I was looking back and worked out, when the MSA index became available for producers, and we started to measure that, is you start to see that this started to shift, is that producers started to understand, and Karis was just running through genetics and understanding about, everything that happens pre-farm gate, if I'd like to say, and the importance of that is, if we can measure where we're at and where we're trying to get to, ultimately, the decisions that you're making on the farm today whether it's tomorrow, next year and further on, is you're going to get a better eating quality outcome, or you're going to get a better outcome moving forward around developing herds and flocks. So that gives you a bit of that, and if I wanted to just run through and give you a WA snapshot, is you start seeing that over 420,000 cattle have been produced here in WA, or put through the model. We've got 6% of all MSA cattle graded out of Australia. 49% of WA graded cattle have gone through, and there's about 10% of MSA registered producers here in WA. But so when we start looking at that and you start to see what it looks like, is as a producer we can start to go, where do we fit in percentile bands? What does it look like, and how am I performing against the rest of the industry? So in this particular case, when we look at the MSA index, we can say the top 5% sits at 65, and if we looked at the bottom 5%, sits at 54.8. So, I mean, you know, when you're talking to producers, the language is now about, you know, where's your index sitting at, what are you doing, how is it contributing, and where are you heading? So when we also look at, you know, comparing non-grain fed versus grain fed, obviously non-grain fed sits at around 61% being processed and 39% being done out of our grass fed, and 77% of our animals are HGP free. So I'll talk a little bit more about that, and obviously the effect of some of those attributes, but I'll flick through. So setting eating quality benchmarks is about understanding, you know, how your cattle are performing against others, understanding the attributes that influence the index, and target production factors to improve performance. So, you know, ultimately, you know, a producer has the opportunity to work out where they fit in the system and how they you know, where they fit, and understand the target market that they're going to, and then being able to make advancements moving forward. So I'll move into the second part, and it's about driving eating quality on farm and the impact of attributes of MSA index. We'll talk about each one of those attributes and how they affect the MSA index, quantifying on-farm changes and the effect of carcass quality. So here's some of the attributes, obviously. So when we run through, you'll have carcass inputs on your left-hand side. We'll have size of the effect on the MSA index units, and will have relative importance. So obviously the top three in there have a very heavy weighting. So if it's a HGP treated animal, it would have a -5 input against it. If it's through a Saleyards, it would have a -5 input against it. And obviously as we run through, whether it's marble score, hump, ossification, rib fat, so they come down in, I suppose, from a very high impact to a low impact, and what that does. So if we look at the top ones, they're obviously management decisions and how you're doing those. And when we look at the second ones, they're more about an environment and genetics, and how you can possibly take place around on farm, and what you can actually have a change with. So when you look at that, it starts to give you an idea of, if I was able to measure my index, and what would be the key things that I could look at to then influence a better index score, or a better animal coming through. So I don't know, you guys probably got a little bit of time, so if you like, that Google MSA calculator, if you got your phone, you could actually just scan it and it'll take you to the website, okay? And the beautiful thing about this MSA index calculator is it actually gives you a virtual platform to start playing with, and putting different attributes against the carcass that you might have. So in this instance, you know, we run through and you will see things like you've got 2 different types of animals coming through, and we've got an index of one animal at 52.67, and then when we look at that other animal, it sits at 60.01. So when we start to look at the attributes of the carcass, we were then able to start to determine what gives us a better MSA index, or what gives us a better eating quality outcome against the carcass. So look, I think that's a really great tool for a producer to be able to just go online, and, you know, as their feedback forms are coming through, is enter this data into the calculator to verify what they're doing. Or if they had a supply chain that was chasing a slightly more high marbled product, they may say, where's my marbling in the system, what it may be sitting at in this particular one, maybe slightly low at 240, and benchmarking if I was trying to get into a supply chain that was chasing a higher marble scored product, that what would I need to do to be able to do that. So we're clicking through. I'll talk about a few of the attributes that can actually make a change on farm. And in this instance, we're talking about a 300, we're looking at a 300 hot standard carcass weight, we're looking at a hump height of 55, we're looking at ossification at 170, and marble score at 300, rib fat of 5. So within that, that's our animal, and we'll see that it spits out at 55, or 58.51. So that animal, you know, they're the key attributes, and what could we do if we were trying to look at increasing, I suppose, our percentile bands within the market. So ultimately, when you look at that, where does that fit? He fits in here, not quite top 50%. It might be a goal of you as a producer, or it might be a goal to be able to increase that index to maybe get into that next percentile band. But ultimately, you see, you know, a lower, you know, the bottom 1% of animals would be very low at 52.95, and ultimately, you know, from a national point, it's quite, you know, low. But at that's a pretty good animal. That gives us a good MSA outcome, and you'd be relatively going into processing, that would give you a really good outcome. So if we're moving through, is what could you do to improve that carcass from an on-farm? And one of the key ones, just simply by looking at the hot standard carcass weight, is, guys, I'm not going to profess to be a producer. I'm a butcher in uniform, but on-farm changes around, you know, gains of feed, or you know, an extra, you know, moving it from, you know, 0.8 of a kilo up to, you know, 1.3 or 1.5 gains per kilo per day of the carcass of the animal eating will give us a higher index, or higher hot standard carcass weight. We can shift that from 300 to 325, and what that means in index points is we're able to pick up 0.23 index points. Ultimately, that's a low impact sort of attribute that would contribute to the animal. But as you start to add a few of these together, you can actually start to influence the index and eating quality of these outcomes. So if we were to move through to the next one, if we were looking at marbling, what does marbling do? It's quite interesting that, you know, the big rage is all about marbled beef today, yeah? You know, if we look at Wagyu beef, I actually think it changed the way we view beef. Wagyu beef, you know, considered the king. It's marble scores from 3 all the way up to 9 pluses, and you get this really fleckled marbling component through the beef. That's changed maybe the consumer's expectation around what flavour profiles do. But the interesting part is that, you know, 73% of the carcass is graded, and 85% of, so grass-fed and 85% of grain-fed carcasses, we're still relatively low in marble score, which is nothing wrong with that, because that's what our market is chasing. So our majors, our independent retail butchers, that is our sort of where they sit at, and then when you start looking at higher marble scores, they become much more targeted approaches. So they may be a longer grain-fed program to be able to then drive higher marblings. But ultimately, the impact of marbling has a relatively impact against the index. And if we sort of flick through and we looked at ways to be able to increase marbling within the herd, or what could be done on farm, is, you know, Karis was talking about genetics. So if we were looking at, you know, a 1% increase in IMF, we would increase about 27 plus or minus points in an MSA index, what we were talking about. We would, you know, if we'd increase that to a 3% IMF increase, we can then start to see, you know, we're shifting our overall herd or our overall eating quality outcome from a 300 to a 360, and we go and we pick up close to 1 index points. That might not sound like a lot, but when you actually start to look at when over the last few years, we've only been able to lift a national herd index of, you know, 1.5 points, close to 2 points. it's a significant increase in eating quality against the carcass. So marbling does, for some reason when we eat it, it excites our taste buds. We get, we really enjoy that flavour profile that comes from marbling. So that gives us a bit of an idea of what the impact of marbling. And if I was looking at that, that's a high impact scenario that can happen. So, sure.
Given that we know marble score plays a huge role in eating quality,
Yep.
especially the juiciness of the beef and the flexibility when you cook, do you think there's a role to actually have a higher percent or a higher proportion of attributing marble score than to say final grade? It doesn't take enough account of marble score.
Yeah, look, I think there's contributing.
What you're trying to do is improve eating.
100%. Yeah. And I think there's other contributing factors. You could still have a high marbled animal with a very high ossification, and there's other attributes that would do that. But I think what you are right in that other markets or some markets are chasing a higher end marble product. So that does account for it in the MSA system. I'm not sure it just had its own place. I think there's more than just marble scores, because otherwise I think we go back to 20 years ago when we did have no eating quality programs and we just went back to dentitions and just put we would buy meat on dentition, which ultimately was it gave us an age of the animal but didn't really give us an eating quality. So I totally agree with that there is certain markets in the marketplace chasing more marbled beef, and as those markets are there, if you're in line with those, I think the producers should be chasing those because there could be a premium for that product. So I think it may be a meat scientist question to go back to them and say, does it sit alone? But when I look at MSA, I think it's a whole of approach.
Well, just on your table you have up there.
Yep.
There's people that have paid extra 50 cents if one of marble score 1 or 2, for example. So
Yep.
that 300 kilo carcass is about $150 a carcass. That's worth a fair bit.
Yeah, for sure. In reality, you're 100% right, that does add value. Certain cuts will hold more marbling than other cuts. Ultimately it's a value-based proposition. That comes back down to, I think, a branding component. I think that comes back to the person that owns that brand and how they communicate that as a marketing tool to then sell more. But you will see that different brands will target, whether it's a marble score 2, marble score 4, and they will pay a premium, or whoever they're selling to will pay a premium for that product on a marble score. So the difference between an MSA marble score is that it's a little bit more refined. It's, with an Ossimeat, marble score, you need exactly those points in there. Anything less and it's deemed 1 point less. With MSA, it's increments of 10. So it might be a 390 and the distribution of fat or the marble score that runs through that. But look, valid point. I understand where you're coming from. Yeah, I'll move past and maybe we can have a bit more of a conversation around it. So obviously marble scores, we see 1 point, from a 200 to a 300, we see 1.62 an increase, and if we were to go again and got it from a 300 to a 400, we get another 1.62 index points against that animal. It's important to also notice that marble beef generally does generate a premium in many instances, but there's also comes with a flavour profile to it. So as you get into a higher marble score, it becomes quite a heavy piece of beef. So if I was to ask you to eat 400 gram steak of Wagyu at marble score 9, you'd probably feel ill by the end of it because it's so rich and passionate, and strong around it. So there's just as many people that will chase a lighter animal where it doesn't have such a big profile around that. So that gives us some impacts around that. But the other one is ossification. So ossification is this little cartilage that turns into bone over time. So we know that has a direct linkage to making meat tougher. So the bundles of meat become tighter, and over time, an older animal becomes slightly tougher than a younger animal. So ossification has a big impact. And really it's a physiological age of the animal instead of dentition, where I mentioned before. You know, you can have a younger animal still have a higher ossification depending on its nutritional plane and how it's been treated and the whole, I suppose, you know, if we look at the whole, I suppose, nutritional benefits of how that animal's gone. So when we look at it from a grain-fed point of view, we have, you know, 46% of animals under 150, that creamy, right, and then 56% of animals 150.
Is there a month thing? We're talking months or years?
In
Ossification.
ossification will happen over its life of the animal.
Where does the radical change sort of happen? Like after 5 years, or what is it?
No, I think look, I'm not a meat scientist, but I would say there's, you know, you can have two animals and one could be down in Albany in that beautiful green grass and, you know, 18 months of age, and we had another animal that was, you know, in a tougher environment and didn't have the right feed. If you brought them back together, you would see a huge difference in ossification scores. So it's more about, yeah, so it's really understanding of what that will go. So, I mean, if we think about, you know, if we talk about Wagyu animals and things like that, they're not super young animals, but they've had a fantastic understanding of where they're getting. So I'm going to quickly move through, guys. I'm sort of chewing up a bit more time. I've got the 5 minutes. So ossification on farm, we can see that, you know, we increase that, or we get that back down to 150. We can ultimately pick up another index point. Again, you know, whole of life nutrition and understanding about, you know, if we're doing EBVs, about understanding the weights at, you know, 400 and 600 days. And Caris, you might have more of an understanding about that than I do, but obviously, you know, a younger animal is going to convert quicker and give you a lower ossification score against it. So what do the changes mean is that, you know, we had an animal that started off at 58.51 index points, and by changing a few of the attributes we're able to increase that to 60.61. And where does that sort of give us? You know, we've increased the hot standard carcass weight, we've reduced the ossification score, and marble score we've been able to increase, and now we end up with moving the percentile band is getting that up into that top 25% or close to that top 25%. So they're the sort of things that the MSA index allows a producer to really understand, and how does that impact on what are the decisions that we can do moving forward as a producer. What does that ultimately look like? It looks like, you know, if we're looking about the index is below 55, where we see this black is, it tells us there's certain cuts within the animal that don't meet MSA grade. And ultimately that, to me, means there's possibilities for failure rate within that animal. So as we start moving up, and we get closer up this thing, we start getting more of the animal giving us a 4 and 5 star outcome, which gives us that, you know, that exceptional eating quality of a carcass. I'll quickly move through, but bring it back to your client's business. You know, so it identifies the opportunities, it sets out the eating quality goals, and using the tools. So I'm going to run out of time, and maybe we can play this at the end, but here's it's a short YouTube clip that allows a producer or anybody to go online and to work out how to use these attributes as a tool to download reports and a whole bunch of information that does that. So I'll play that at the end if that's okay. And ultimately, you know, it's about setting eating quality goals and understanding, knowing your market. You want to do marbled beef and you have somebody chasing it and they're prepared to pay you more for it, then that's a perfect opportunity. Make it part of the objective, align your profit drivers, so obviously being realistic with changes. And in this instance, we're looking at a pasture-fed finished animal. You know, the benchmark is, you know, they're doing a domestic supermarket at 250, 280. We're looking at, you know, can I minimise my non-compliance below 5%? And, you know, my index sits at 58.05. Is there a chance of being able to increase that index to 59 and increase the eating quality over a period of time? So change takes time, but ultimately it's about continue to increase the eating quality. So the resources, you know, MLA, you have kill data, they have feedback sheets, you can log into my MSA as an MSA producer, and you get to do some whole bunch of benchmarking, national, state, regional, indexes, non-compliance, key carcass attributes, reports over time. There's a whole bunch of information to be able to give the producer the opportunity to look at how and what are the key influences to make improvements within the system. We also look at the Australian beef eating quality insights and the beef and sheep meat information tips and tools. So feel free, if you get the opportunity and you want to learn or understand a bit more about what that, as advisors of what are the tips and tools that are available for producers, here's a great, some great resources through MLA. So some take-home messages is really about, the varying impact on MSA index, which can be improved through a combination of nutritional strategies and, I suppose, genetics. Using benchmark tools available to understand how cattle are performing to assist with decision making ultimately on farm, and using the tool that's available to be able to do that. So logging in through my MSA and being able to understand what, just benchmarking where you are and comparing against the market where I suppose, and where you want to get to. But just quickly, so as part of that, it's about producers can become MSA. So if they wanted to become an MSA registered producer, you could get onto Producer My MSA, fill in their details to become an MSA registered producer. And at this particular time, things like vendor declaration forms are available, as part of the service to be at a discount. I think it's actually at a free rate at the moment to subsidise through these difficult times. But ultimately, I look back and I go from a butcher's point of view, going right through the supply chain, is we have more information at our fingertips more than ever. So, I can jump on my phone right now. I could log in. I could check what my carcasses are doing. If I needed to get better, or if I had a market demand about what do I need to do and how do I need to achieve it, it's at our fingertips. It's probably more about understanding is how to drive these tools from a producer's point of view, that ultimately, that when I stand there as a butcher or an end user selling meat, is that we eliminate failure rate. So guys, I think that snaps me off in time. Is that right?
Yep.
Perfect.
Thanks, Rafael. Just for my interest, where do all abattoirs do the MSA grading of the carcasses?
So an abattoir needs to be obviously an OSMEAT. Sorry. So for an abattoir to do MSA grading, it needs to be an OSMEAT accredited facility, and then an MSA accredited facility. So not all domestic plants would be MSA grading, but there is a significant amount of MSA accredited producers within, or processors within WA and nationally. Yeah.
And more commonly in Western Australia?
Yeah, so there's only a few small domestic plants that aren't grading, but most of our processing capabilities in here have MSA accreditation.
So to get the data, the grower needs to register?
So you can, if you want to be on the My MSA, you can get on there and you would get that information. You could pull that down yourself, or you would, when you do a kill, you would then get a kill sheet and you can ask for your MSA data at the same time. But
from the abattoir?
From the abattoir. But ultimately, you should, if you're part of that process, and you could just log into your My MSA, and that'll give you capabilities of pulling down that data yourself and then doing reporting over time, which is a fantastic feature.
Excellent, thank you.
No troubles.
Yes, Kelly.
At the start, you mentioned that the number of animals MSA graded in WA was quite a bit lower than what I expected. Is that because of the number of, a couple of abattoirs that don't MSA grade, or what's the resistance from producers to register and have animals MSA graded?
Yeah, good question, yeah. But look, ultimately it comes down to, I suppose, type of cattle, meeting pathways. So Saleyards become quite difficult. So a lot of our cattle go through Saleyards, and meeting the curfew and the travel restrictions that go back into a processing plant that meet MSA pathways is one of the challenges around not all cattle, or the higher number of cattle going through that pathway. ultimately, I would like to think at some stage, as we address some of those challenges, that, ultimately I'd love to see every animal graded. From a butcher's point of view, it gives you eating quality outcomes and tells you if I need to age a product, then I'm able to do that. But yeah, I'd say that Saleyards is probably one of our biggest challenges around doing, around processing numbers. Any other questions?
It's Greg.
Yeah, just a random one from consumer, really. Do you think there's a change coming with or whether the MSA gradings really relate to this slow cook, slow brisket smoking trend that's taking off at the moment, or doesn't it really matter?
Yeah, 100%. So the new MSA next gen model actually has captured a few more cooking methods. So low and slow, it captures combotherm ovens, and it captures sous vide and a few other cooking traits. I think as the program develops and we understand more about cut by cooking methods, is it will continue to capture more data. But 100% is we can single muscle profile. You can have two muscles within that brisket, and you can understand the eating qualities within those two briskets and put a cooking technique over the top of them. So some of the work that I have been doing with places like the Perth Convention Centre and different caterers is getting them to understand the cut by cook combinations and understanding the technology that they have. So, combotherm ovens these days, we now have a measurement that if we cook it, we can get within a rump, an example, we can pick up 9 eating quality points by changing the cooking technique from a grill to a combotherm oven. So I think that's a real plus within the program to be able to pinpoint a better outcome by changing the cooking technique. So hopefully that gives you some sort of understanding of cut by cooks moving forward.
Just keep buying your brisket, Greg. I think that's the message. Hey, sorry.
What's the variation between breedings in terms of tropical or Angus, different breedings? The index, how it changed?
Sure. So there is, when it comes to tropical breeds, there is, it might not have been up on that screen, but there is an index. So problem with that is you have more of a variance within a breed than against another breed. So you can have an Angus that gives you a really good index outcome, but he might have the perfect eating quality traits, but you can also have a really bad outcome from that same breed because he may have a high ossification and a harder, I suppose, nutritional plan coming through. So there is, I don't know exactly what that number is, and I can get it for you, but there is a negative impact that's built in against tropical breed content. So once upon a time, a producer would pick 50% and work its way down a tropical breed or a hunt as it does, and that would be the algorithm that would do it. Now we measure hump height, which then gives us a much more defined tropical breed content within the breed, and then the algorithm works out the negative or plus within the breeds.
Just before we finish, would you?
It's more observation. I've sort of mentioned to Karas before, but I just keep on asking for it. Is more from the wishing list of the point of view of a consultant, if we could have a dummy My MSA that we could use to work with groups, because otherwise we are using a private person data.
Yeah, look, it's something I'll take back to the team. I think the more, the more information we can communicate out and understanding around that, it's a fantastic tool. So I'm not sure of of what that legalities are around doing that, but I'm sure that the MSA team would be more than happy to work with a consultant in that space to get key messages across. A lot of questions on this one, eh?
Michael's going to come and get you in a minute.
Yeah. I'll cut me off if you want. Just wondering where the sheep industry's at in developing something like MSA for sheep meat. And also a secondary question on, obviously most consumers buy their meat from a supermarket. Is like the Coles and Woolies, do they use MSA grading on all their meat, or could it be anything in that packet?
Yeah, I'll go the second question first. So Coles and Woolworths use the MSA as a tool. So they'll grade all their animals, and that is definitely what they build. So they'll send their animals off to the processing. They put them in lines of eating quality, and they're called PBR lines, and then they'll push those through to the consumer. While they might not put MSA on the logo, they're definitely using the tool to be able to predict eating quality to go to the consumer. The first question was around sheep meat, and yeah, it's $1 million question, isn't it? But I think, I've been lucky enough to work with Murdoch Uni over the last few years around building, or getting more understanding around sheep meat. And, the challenge is around, measuring IMF and having technology that can measure, whether it's a cut surface or through, to be able to get an objective measurement. And that's what they're working on at the moment. So there's a couple of objective measurements around IMF, and we're able to do that within the beef category, which then opens up the window. So I'm not sure how far that is away. I know that they're working pretty hard on it, and hopefully within the next couple of years we'll have a sheep meat model that it replicates the beef, because I just think it's a wonderful opportunity to get back down to eating quality and really drive some value-based producing and processing.
Thank you. I'm getting a real bad look from Michael, so we must move on. Rafael, look, thank you very much.
Appreciate that.
It was thoroughly engrossing. Today's been really about people being objective, benchmarking, so the MSA grading system falls well into that, and I think the fact that growers can get that information and make adjustments to what they do that translates, as Alan's saying, into real money, I think that's been fantastic. So there's a little appreciation from us. Thank you very much.
Appreciate that.
Me down. So
Thank
please
you.
join me.
Thank you.